I do, with all my heart. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may now kiss your beautiful bride.
The church fell silent. David looked from Amara to his mother, unable to understand what was happening. Mrs. Victoria's smile slowly disappeared as fear filled her eyes. Then Amara took a deep breath and said, "Before I become part of this family, tell your son whose baby you've been raising for 28 years. The expensive handbag slipped from Mrs. Victoria's trembling hand. 2 years earlier, Amara Okafor lived a simple life in Lagos. By day, she worked as a teacher at a private primary school. By evening, she hurried home to care for her widowed grandmother, who had raised her since childhood. Life wasn't easy, but Amara believed that integrity was worth more than money. She had no idea that one unexpected meeting would soon change her life forever. Across the city, the Easy family lived in one of Lagos' most luxurious mansions. Chief Emmanuel Eze had built a ₦1 billion real estate empire from the ground up. His only son, David, was admired for his humility despite growing up surrounded by unimaginable wealth. To the outside world, they were the perfect family. No one imagined they had been living with a secret that could destroy everything. Unlike many wealthy young men, David never cared about flashy parties or social status. He preferred spending time overseeing his father's projects and supporting the family's charity foundation. One Saturday afternoon, a charity event at Amara's school would bring their two very different worlds together. Neither of them knew that meeting had been written by fate. The charity event was almost over when David noticed a little boy sitting alone in a corner, quietly crying, while everyone else hurried past him. Amara knelt beside the child, wiped away his tears, and patiently helped him find his mother. David watched from a distance. For the first time in years, someone had caught his attention. As the guests prepared to leave, David walked over and introduced himself. Amara smiled politely, unaware that she was speaking to the heir of one of Nigeria's richest families. To her, he was simply a kind stranger. That honesty made David smile. It had been a long time since someone looked at him without seeing his wealth first. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed again and again, sometimes over coffee, sometimes at some charity projects, sometimes by pure coincidence. What began as simple conversations slowly grew into something neither of them could ignore. Before long, David realized he had fallen deeply in love. A month later, David invited Amara to dinner at the Eze family mansion. As the massive black gates slowly opened, Amara couldn't believe her eyes. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Uniformed security guards stood at attention. The mansion looked more like a 5-star resort than a family home. She had never imagined people could live like this. Chief Emmanuel welcomed Amara with a warm smile. Within minutes, she understood why so many people respected him. He spoke kindly to everyone, from his business partners to the gardeners serving drinks in the courtyard. Mrs. Victoria was equally charming. She embraced Amara warmly, making her feel like she already belonged to the family. Everything seemed perfect, almost too perfect. As dinner came to an end, a family photo hanging on the wall caught Amara's attention. She smiled as she admired it. But the moment Mrs. Victoria noticed where she was looking, her smile disappeared. Without saying a word, she quickly removed the photograph from the wall and handed it to a housekeeper. Amara frowned. It was only a photograph, so why did it seem to frighten her? As the weeks passed, Amara became a regular visitor to the Ease mansion. The staff adored her kindness, and Chief Emmanuel often joked that David had chosen the perfect wife. Even Mrs. Victoria treated her like the daughter she never had. But every now and then, Amara would catch Victoria staring at David with tears in her eyes. Whenever David asked if she was all right, she would simply smile and say, "I'm just grateful to have you." One afternoon, Chief Emmanuel invited Amara to accompany him to the Easy Foundation. As they toured the children's hospital the family had built, he smiled and said, "Money means nothing if it cannot change someone's life." His words stayed with Amara. She finally understood why so many people admired the billionaire. Behind the wealth was a man with a generous heart. That evening, as everyone prepared to leave the foundation, an elderly woman accidentally bumped into David. She looked up at his face and suddenly froze. Tears filled her eyes. In a trembling voice, she whispered, "You look exactly like..." Before she could finish her sentence, Mrs. Victoria rushed over and quickly led David away. The old woman stood there, still staring after him. Amara couldn't stop thinking about the elderly woman's reaction. The way she looked at David. It wasn't the look of a stranger. It was the look of someone who had lost something precious. When Amara asked Mrs. Victoria who the woman was, she answered almost immediately, "Just someone who used to work for our foundation years ago." But for the first time, Amara felt she was being lied to. 2 days later, Mrs. Victoria asked Amara to help organize some old family documents before the wedding. As she sorted through neatly arranged files, a worn brown envelope slipped onto the floor. Inside was an old hospital wristband. Written across it was one name, Baby Boy Adeyemi. Before Amara could look any closer, Mrs. Victoria rushed in and snatched the envelope from her hands. She forced a smile. "It's just an old hospital record. It means nothing." But her trembling hands told a different story. That night, sleep refused to come. One question echoed through Amara's mind. If David's surname was Easy, why was an old hospital record hidden inside the family's private documents with the name Adeyemi on it? The more she thought about it, the less everything made sense. She knew she should let it go. Instead, she decided to find the truth. The next morning, Amara couldn't ignore the feeling in her heart. Baby boy Adeyemi. Why would Mrs. Victoria keep something like that hidden? Curiosity soon became determination. Without telling David, Amara drove to St. Catherine's Specialist Hospital, the prestigious private hospital where David had been born 28 years earlier. Surely, someone there still remembered that night. Inside the hospital, Amara introduced herself and politely requested access to an old maternity record. The receptionist smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Records from that long ago are confidential." No matter how hard Amara pleaded, the answer remained the same. Disappointed, she thanked the staff and walked toward the parking lot. Just as she reached her car, an elderly groundskeeper called out softly, "Excuse me, young lady." Amara turned around. The elderly man glanced over his shoulder to make sure no one was listening. Then he lowered his voice. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation." Amara's heart skipped a beat. The old man looked at the hospital wristband in her hand. His expression changed instantly. "That child," he whispered. "People were paid to forget what happened that night." Amara stood frozen. "If you're searching for the truth," he continued, pulling out a small piece of paper, "find Nurse Esther Daniels. She was on duty the night that baby was born." He placed the note into Amara's hand, then walked away before she could ask another question. The address led Amara to a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Lagos. She stopped in front of a small but neatly kept bungalow. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. An elderly woman peeked outside. "Yes, how may I help you?" Amara smiled politely. "Are you Nurse Esther Daniels?" The woman's smile vanished instantly. Without saying another word, she tried to shut the door. "Please, wait," Amara pleaded, gently holding the door. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want the truth." Nurse Esther shook her head. Tears filled her eyes. "No," she whispered. "That secret should have stayed buried forever." Then she pulled the door shut. Amara stood there, more convinced than ever that she was on the right path. As Amara turned to leave, she noticed an old framed photograph lying on the veranda floor. The glass had cracked with age. She bent down to pick it up. Her eyes widened. Standing beside a much younger Nurse Esther were two smiling women. One was Mrs. Victoria. The other was the same woman who had stared at David outside the foundation. "Grace," Amara whispered. For the first time, she realized the two women had once been friends. The next morning, Amara returned to Nurse Esther's house. This time, she wasn't leaving without answers. Before she could knock, the front door opened. Nurse Esther looked exhausted. She held a small wooden box tightly against her chest. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Come inside. I've been carrying this burden for 28 years." Inside the quiet living room, Nurse Esther gently placed the wooden box on the table. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were faded photographs, old maternity records, and a tiny blue hospital bracelet. She looked at Amara and sighed. "Everything you're looking for," she swallowed hard, "is inside this box." Nurse Esther closed her eyes. Victoria and Grace weren't just friends. They were like sisters. When Grace announced she was expecting a baby, Victoria smiled, celebrated with her, and even organized the baby shower. But behind that smile, she was hiding a desperate secret. Victoria couldn't have children, and she believed her billionaire husband would leave her if she failed to give him an heir. So, she made a decision that would destroy 4 lives forever. Nurse Esther took a deep breath. The day Grace told Victoria she was pregnant, everything changed. Although Victoria smiled and congratulated her best friend, she cried herself to sleep that night. She had secretly been told she could never have children, terrified that her billionaire husband would leave her without an heir. She made a desperate decision. The very next morning, she looked Emmanuel in the eyes and smiled. "Emmanuel," she whispered, "I'm pregnant." Chief Emmanuel lifted her into his arms with tears of joy. He had no idea. His wife had just told the first lie that would destroy countless lives. To make the lie believable, Victoria secretly bribed Dr. Kunle Balogun. The corrupt doctor announced that her pregnancy was extremely high risk. She must remain on complete bed rest, he warned. No unnecessary visitors, no stress, and absolutely no examinations. Emmanuel never questioned the doctor's orders. He was busy expanding his business empire and trusted the hospital completely. For 9 long months, Victoria stayed hidden from the world, pretending to carry a child that didn't exist. 9 months later, Grace went into labour at St. Catherine's Specialist Hospital. Just minutes afterward, Victoria was quietly admitted into a separate VIP maternity suite. Everything had been carefully arranged. When Grace finally gave birth to a healthy baby boy, she smiled weakly through her tears. "Can I hold my son?" she whispered. Dr. Kunle slowly turned to Nurse Esther. "Take the baby," he ordered quietly. "Do exactly as we agreed." Nurse Esther's hands began to tremble. "Doctor, we can't do this," she cried. "She's his mother." "Do it," Dr. Kunle snapped, "or you'll never work in this hospital again." With tears streaming down her face, Nurse Esther carried the newborn out of Grace's room. Grace, exhausted after the difficult delivery and still under heavy medication, slipped back into unconsciousness, never knowing her baby had just been taken away. Moments later, Dr. Kunle walked into Emmanuel's waiting room. "Congratulations, sir," he announced with a smile. "Your wife has delivered a healthy baby boy, but she's still under sedation after complications. She'll see you soon." Chief Emmanuel thanked God with tears of joy. He never imagined the child he was celebrating had just been stolen from another mother. Nurse Esther looked at Amara with tears in her eyes. "I've carried this guilt for 28 years. Please, don't let me die with this secret." Amara quietly stood up. She knew exactly what she had to do. The wedding had to be stopped. 3 days later, the church bells echoed across Lagos. Guests from every corner of the country gathered for what many called the wedding of the year. Business moguls, politicians, celebrities, and family friends filled the magnificent cathedral. No one inside knew they weren't just about to witness a wedding, they were about to witness the truth. The ceremony went beautifully. The vows were exchanged. The rings were placed on their fingers. Then the pastor smiled warmly. "David, you may kiss your bride." David smiled and gently held Amara's hands. Slowly, he leaned in, but just before their lips could meet, Amara stepped back. The cathedral fell silent. David frowned. Amara, what's wrong? Amara took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. Before this marriage continues, someone who has been denied her rightful place for 28 years deserves to stand before us. Confused whispers spread through the cathedral. Victoria forced a smile. Amara, what are you talking about? But Amara said nothing. Instead, she turned toward the entrance. Nurse Esther, please come forward. An elderly woman slowly walked down the aisle, clutching old hospital records to her chest. Grace watched in confusion. David looked from Amara to Nurse Esther. Nothing made sense. When Nurse Esther reached the altar, she fell to her knees. Forgive me, she cried. I've carried this sin for 28 years. Through uncontrollable tears, Nurse Esther confessed everything. How Victoria lied about being pregnant, how Dr. Coonley accepted her money, how Grace gave birth to a healthy baby boy, how she carried that newborn into Victoria's private suite, and how another baby's body was placed into Grace's grieving arms. The church was silent. Not a single person moved. Nurse Esther slowly raised her trembling hand and pointed toward David. Grace, the son you believed you lost, is standing before you. Grace gasped. David stood frozen. Neither of them could believe what they had just heard. Nurse Esther wiped her tears. There was something else. Victoria couldn't live with what she had done. Every month, she secretly paid Grace's rent, hospital bills, and living expenses. Grace believed the money came from her ex-husband, thinking he still pitied her from afar. But it never did. It was Victoria. It was the only way she knew how to ease the guilt she carried. Victoria lowered her head. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I couldn't give your son back, she whispered, so I spent 28 years trying to make sure you never slept hungry. Grace stared at her in stunned silence. The money, the anonymous bank transfers, the unexpected help, it all finally made sense. Chief Emmanuel staggered backward. His voice trembled. Victoria, tell me she's lying. Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence was all the answer he needed. Grace looked at David. Tears blurred her vision. My son, she whispered. David slowly walked toward her. Every step felt unreal. He stopped right in front of her. All these years. You thought I was gone? Grace nodded through her tears. Every single day. Without another word, David pulled her into his arms. The cathedral erupted in tears. Chief Emmanuel gently led Grace to the altar. Grace, he said softly, will you bless your son's marriage? Still trembling, Grace placed her hands on David and Amara. May your home never be built on lies. May your children always know the love of both their parents. May God restore every family that has been broken. Amen, the congregation replied. David turned to Victoria. Tears filled his eyes. Thank you for raising me. I forgive you, but I can't forget what Grace lost. Please, stay away from me for now. Victoria broke down in tears. Chief Emmanuel took David's hand. You may not be my biological son, but you are my son in every way that matters. Nothing will change that. Everything I built will still be yours. Then he turned to Victoria. As for you, I can forgive what you did, but I can no longer live with it. Our marriage ends today." Victoria lowered her head and quietly walked out of the cathedral alone. As sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, David looked at Grace. She smiled through her tears and gently nodded. Only then did David and Amara share their first kiss as husband and wife. The cathedral erupted in applause. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth, it's the truth. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable African billionaire and family drama stories. See you in the next one.